So now turning to California, California is 12+% of the US economy. So everything that David said about the year of living dangerously applies to California. And what we want to do is look at those things that are different about California that will affect the trajectory of the California economy. So when we were together last June, this was the title of my talk. I don't think it had that hand in there, but it was a sign of a slowing economy. And so today I've just changed that a little bit, that still signs of a slowing economy, but no slowing yet. And I want to explore that by looking at a number of sectors. And those sectors include logistics, which should be affected by the trade wars, tourism, housing, employment, and then looking at kind of more deeply output in manufacturing, information, and technology, which really links to the second part of our program, and that'll lead us to the forecast. So let's begin with logistics. What you see in the two slides here are imports and exports through California's seaports. The top line represents the largest seaports here in North America, and that's LA and Long Beach. On the left-hand side, that's imports. And if you look over here, what you notice is there's no kind of real pattern. I mean, there's a seasonal pattern there, but you don't really notice any change. There's been some moving around of when you get imports and when it drops off due to shippers, trying to game when tariffs are going to increase and when they've got breathing room. On the bottom is San Francisco Bay Area ports. And again, you can't really see any difference there. On the right-hand side is exports, and maybe there's a decline in exports, but it's hard to make a case that there really is any significant decline either in the Southern California ports or the Northern California ports. Turning now to our airports on the left-hand side, that is imports and exports out of LAX, which is, of course, our large international airport. The top line is inbound. And what you see is we had a trend, and now it's flattened out. And the bottom line are exports, and we had a trend, and maybe that's gone negative. So we see a little bit of signs of slowing here. In the right-hand diagram, that's where the bulk of the package delivery comes from by air transport. And that's the red line there is Ontario Airport, and you see kind of a real dramatic rise, but that was a lot of that was to do with change of ownership of the airport. And you get kind of over on the right-hand side, and at least the trend is still upward, but the trend is kind of bent over there a little bit. The blue line is Oakland, and in Oakland you also had an upward trend, and now it's gone flat. So what we see is some signs of weakness here in air transport. Moving now to tourism, these are international arrivals at LAX, that's the top, and SFO is the bottom. Again, SFO, you don't really see any change in that. For LAX, you do, it's gone flat. Now, one thing is that international tourism in California is heavily dependent on Chinese tourism. And the Chinese government issued a bulletin saying, if you're going to be a tourist in the US, be careful because it's a dangerous place to be. And coming through customs, they're going to hassle you. They might even take your phone. And of course, in China, the phone is all important because they don't have cash anymore. And so they're really dependent on their phones. So that may be just a function of the trade wars, that we have a kind of a pullback in Chinese tourism to California. Moving forward into the housing market, so this is new home sales existing single-family home sales. These data come from California Association of Realtors. And the average from 2015 to 2017 is 420,000 homes per month. And that's that dashed blue line. And you can see that back in 2017, end of 2017, into 2018, we had a fall off in sales. And that was the time when the SALT deduction was reduced with the new tax law. And then it kind of comes back up to the average, although that's the high buying season, so you would expect it to be above average then, but just about touches the average. And then nationwide, we saw weakness in housing, and David talked about that. Now it's going to come back up, and in the last number there, it's sort of fallen off. So in the high buying season, we're still below average. So housing markets remain relatively weak in California, but we're not seeing any dramatic change here. And so right now being July, we're 3.3% below the average when we should be above the average. So turning then to housing prices, the left-hand side is median home price. And the median home prices, as you see, it dipped when we had that fall off in sales. Now it's back to where it was. So home appreciation from the median home price, there's basically no appreciation. On the right-hand side, that's the Case-Shiller, and that represents San Francisco at the top, San Diego in the middle, Los Angeles on the bottom. Again, no real home price appreciation, right? So all of this has implications for home building, for residential construction in California. And what you see here is monthly new permits, and the data that's on this graph goes through July. So it doesn't include those August numbers that David talked about. Through July, we have had a fall off because of those tepid housing markets of 16.6%. So it's a 3-month average, 16.6% to a year earlier, right? We just got this morning the August numbers. They're a little bit better. We're only 11.2% below where we were a year ago, right? So housing markets are weak, remain weak, so that's one of the signs of weaknesses, but it's getting a little bit better, so it doesn't seem like it's imploding. So now let's turn to some of the good news in California. This is payroll employment gains. Now, if you look at these payroll employment gains, the numbers at the top go back to 2016, 28,000 jobs per month on average. Then it bumps up to 32,000 and drops down to 23,000. Well, when we were doing 28 to 30,000 jobs per month, the unemployment rate was much higher than today. I mean, today our unemployment rate is 4.1%. And so last year we thought, we're running out of people because the number of jobs per month dropped to 23,000. But here we are in 2019 and we're up at 27,000. So we keep adding jobs in California, even though we're near full employment. And where are those jobs that we're adding? So this is by region. And look at the two over the left that I'm indicating with SF and SV. So you know what those are. San Francisco, where the unemployment rate is below 3%, had payroll job growth of above 3%, which is really remarkable. Silicon Valley, same thing, is above 2.5%. So these are the jobs that are being created in California. We know them as the tech centers in California, and that's the subject of our continuing discussion later in the morning. Then Inland Empire and San Joaquin Valley, well, that's where a lot of these people are living because of high home prices in the West Bay, and then also the East Bay and San Diego. The red is the US, the Central Coast, which has been lagging, and Los Angeles are about the same as the US, with Orange County over on the right still kind of growing very slowly as it has been all through the expansion. What kinds of jobs? The jobs are pretty much widespread throughout California. You probably can't read this, so let me read the first few. Construction, education, professional, scientific, and technical services, healthcare, administrative services, information, a real mix of high-wage and low-wage jobs. And now what I want to do is focus on just a couple of these and look at output from those jobs. And those are going to be professional, scientific, and technical services, information, and durable goods manufacturing. And durable goods manufacturing employment grew at about 2% over the last 12 months. So let's take a look at those and look at output. On the left-hand side is durable goods manufacturing. The blue line is output. So that's real output, taking out inflation. And if you take the last 3 months, so that's June, July, August, compared to the previous 3 months, durable goods manufacturing in California grew at a 5.3% rate. If you look at employment, employment grows at 2.5% rate. So that difference, well, for one thing, it doesn't count hours, it's just people and output. But that difference is something really quite interesting. And we don't know exactly what causes that difference. It's an indication there's more productivity gain, but also that hours may be counted incorrectly. So if we think of companies that are manufacturing in California, Tesla, SpaceX, and so on, a large number of scientists and engineers who are salaried employees, so they're counted as 40 hours. And if you have any friends who work for SpaceX, you know they don't work 40 hours. So maybe we're undercounting the hours, and that's part of it. But at any rate, manufacturing's been growing in California, and Ed's going to talk about the highly educated workforce and how many hours they're working and their incentives. It also says those who are going to be hired in manufacturing, they're different than those who used to be hired in manufacturing. On the right-hand side is one of our technology sectors. Information, we get a 9.4% increase in output, 2.6% increase in employment, and this is where the technological revolution in entertainment lives. Turning then to another technology sector, professional, scientific, and technical services, we've got an 8% growth rate in output and a 4.3% growth rate in employment. This is where the software engineers live, right? So what we've got here in California are the sectors that are disproportionately California sectors. They're growing really fast. And that's why all through this expansion, California's been one of the fastest growing states by, depending on where you pick your start and end time, only behind Washington State in terms of GDP growth. Okay, so that brings us to the implications for the forecast, that we have continuing signs of potential slowing, and those are going to be in international trade, in tourism, and housing. But can you remember where I started? Signs of slowing. But these are things to watch. But don't worry, because our job numbers and our economic growth, have really been quite good and better than that in the U.S. So from that, let's turn to the forecast. Payroll employment, again, California is obviously a big part of the U.S., but a part of the U.S. And we have slowing in the U.S., so we have slowing job growth to 1.1% next year, still better than the U.S., and then picking up in 2021 at really about the same rate as the U.S. The unemployment rate, because of that, will come up from the 4.1% to about 4.5%, average 4.6% over the next 2 years. And that really starts to kick in the second half of 2020 when we get that significant weakening in the U.S. economy. And then a moment ago, I spoke about housing. We have actually pulled down our forecast for housing starts in California. We have that increasing through the middle of next year, giving us an average of 123,000, about 124,000 for 2020, and then up to 129,000 the next year. If you think about the number of homes that need to be rebuilt because of natural disasters in California and subtract those out, we're very far away from building enough housing to address the housing affordability issue here in California. And in spite of everything that's being done, at least in this business cycle, the private sector is not going to solve housing affordability. That is a 20, 30 year project, not a 5-year project. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the California forecast. Just one additional item. David talked about our view that the trade wars, we're not going to come to an early resolution. Our thinking of that is in the Cathay Bank UCLA Anderson Forecast, US-China Economic Relations essay that William and I wrote. That's in your packet. So if you want to dig deeper into that, that is there. And that ends the California forecast. And let me turn it over to Ed to talk about workforce development. Thank you.